Hey guys, so today we're going to make a simple Flask application that's going to take a URL and it's going to return just the word hello. This is probably the simplest Flask application you can make, and it's only going to be around 5 or 6 lines of code. Okay, so let's get it going. First, what you have to do is you have to import the library. Second of all, we have to make an application instance, and we make an application instance as so. So here, this name argument tells Flask where in relation to the starting point other files are in the application structure. So later on, when we start using templates and static files, we'll be able to actually, this is going to actually make sense because it just tells Flask, well, right now, all it does is tell Flask where it is and where other things are supposed to be in relation to itself. Okay. So the first thing that we have to understand to use Flask is routing. What is a route? A route is simply a way of matching a URL to some logic. So for example, if we have app route and we do just like a base route, we say, okay, so when you go to our website, just go to the base domain. It's going to match this. And what we want is to do some logic based on that match. So if we match something, we want to have a function that does something for us. And here, all we're going to do is just say hello. So if you don't understand this, imagine you have a domain called domain. And someone goes to this domain. If someone goes to this domain, this route gets matched. And when this route gets matched, it's going to run this function. Okay, save this and open your terminal. Okay, so before you can actually start your application, you have to export your Flask variable. And you do so like this. I'm using, the name of this file is main.py, so if you named your file something else, you may need to change this to what you named your application. And then you type flask run. And as you can see, my server has started on port 5000. So let's open this URL. And as we can see, in my browser, I'm getting the word hello. And status code 200, everything's fine. And if we keep going to this URL, we keep getting the same thing. Okay, so that's a really basic Flask application. Okay guys, so now we're gonna make a dynamic URL. And to make a dynamic URL, it's actually really simple. All you have to do is specify in this route something like this. So what you're looking for here is less than sign and a greater than sign, and then some name to, this isn't related to this at all, so just some name that you can identify it with. Then what you're going to do is you're going to pass that name into your function that handles that route. And when you pass it into that route, when you pass it into that function, you'll be able to use whatever the user entered as this URL here. And I'll show you an example. So what we're doing now is all we're doing is we're saying, hey, if someone enters a name here, we're going to use that name and we're going to print it out, or we're going to return it to the user. And let's actually run this code to see how it works. Okay, so I'm getting a not found error, and that's fine because there is no base route anymore. I'm only using this dynamic route at this moment. So because of that, you have to go into your URL and give it, I don't know, a name, I guess. So let's just say John. So what we did is we caught this route and, well, sorry, not caught, I mean, Flask matched this route because you enter something dynamic here and it printed out hello and then the name. Now, what we can also do is we can specify that this route should only match integers. So if you want to only match integers, you would have to come in here and put int and then a colon. And what this does is it tells Flask, hey, this route, whatever is entered here, it should be an integer. If it's not an integer, don't match it. Save it, and let's try again. As you can see, we're getting a not found error again. So to fix that, we have to type something like 55. And as you can see, it works. That's the bare basics of dynamic routing. Okay guys, so now we're going to get started with templating. Flask uses the Jinja 2 templating engine in the framework. So we're going to use that to do our templates. And to set up our templating, what we have to do is we have to make a new subdirectory inside of our application folder, and we have to call it templates. So make a folder and call it templates. Okay. Now inside of your templates folder, you have to make a new template. So I'm gonna call this index.html, but you can call it whatever you want. Okay. So now open this file. And in here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the variable we got from the previous tutorial, and we're gonna simply show it inside of this template in a h1 tag. So make an h1, and in here, I'm gonna use this Jinja syntax, and I'm gonna pass my variable in here. So when you see these two squiggly brackets, that indicates Jinja 2 syntax, so you understand. Okay. Now, inside of your main.py file, you have to import render template. And down here, we're gonna remove this string and we're gonna do render template. And the first argument is the name of the template you want to render. And our template is called index.html. And the second argument is the name of your variable. So we're gonna call this name is equal to name. So whatever the template variable is called, we're gonna assign it the variable out here. Okay, so now let's actually run this. And I'm gonna open this up. Okay. And as before, we don't really have a base directory, a base route, so I'm getting a not found error. And that's fine. What we're gonna do is we're gonna go /55 again, and as you can see, we rendered that template. We sent it the variable name, and in this index.html, our h1 is styling whatever is being returned, as you can see. I don't like the int, so I'm gonna remove this and just make it a name, so it actually is a name. I think I have to restart this. Okay, there you go. So that's the bare basics of how to do templating. In this tutorial, we're going to see a few logic constructs that you can use inside to either loop through a list of elements or do conditional checking on variables. So what I decided to do is I decided to just have a hard-coded list of items called stuff, and I'm going to pass it into the render template. So I can do some pretty quick playing with on the template side. Anyways, let's get to it. So the first thing I want to show you is how to do a for loop inside of Jinja. For loops in Jinja are very similar to the way you would do it in Python. So if you're familiar with for in loops, they basically work the same way, except you need to have this special Jinja syntax applied to it. So first you do an open curly brace, you do a %sign, and then do a closing %sign. And inside of here, you type for, and then whatever you want each element to be named in stuff. And to close this off, you do the same thing, except you do and for. Okay, so right now, whatever we put here is going to be rendered inside of your web browser, basically. So let's say we want to make each of these elements h1s. Then we do h1 thing, close it off, save it. Now let's run our server. Okay. Do Flask run. Okay, we have a server running. Now let's get to a server. As you can see, each element was rendered as an h1. Okay, that's pretty simple to understand, I hope. Now let's introduce some conditional checking. If you want to render the number 1 as an h1, and then you want to render the number 2 as a h2, and the rest as whatever else, we can do it like this. You would want to use an if statement. And to use an if statement, they look pretty similar to for loops. Except you just do if thing is equal to 1. And then at the end, you type and if. And that closes the if statement. Now, if thing is equal to 1, we are going to render it as an h1. Okay. Now, if we want to check if it's a 2, we can say elif thing is equal to 2. Then we're going to render this as an h2. Probably should keep it consistent. Okay. And if we want to render the rest of them as h3s, we do else, and we're going to render it as an h3. Okay, so restart the server again, run it, go to your website, and as you can see, 1 is a h1, 2 is an h2, and the rest are h3s. And that's pretty much, I think we covered a lot about Jinja, and in the future, I'm not sure if I should continue with Jinja or just move on to databases, but we'll see.